On the first day, we had an induction, and the facilitator was going around the table, and he picked on me first, and he asked the question, what would your dream career be? For some reason, I ended up saying Prime Minister. When I decided to get into politics, I didn't sit down and think, okay, which party should I join? It was just natural.
Before we go any further, is why the Conservative Party?
I know, a brilliant question. As KHOJAs particularly, or even Muslims, KHOJAs particularly, we're inherently conservative people. I'd never say to anyone you should join the Conservative Party. I always say join a party that you broadly align your values with.
But where you've got a Conservative Party that's riddled with Islamophobia, how do you operate within that zone?
Islamophobia is not a party political issue, it's a society issue. And I publicly condemned Islamophobia in my party, such as Suella Braverman, her rhetoric on hate marches, etc. And I almost quit, I should say, because in the transparent of having an honest chat, this is a fireside chat.
With regards to Palestine, with regards to Gaza, to see such a genocide in process and progress, it's been leveled at you that you've not been vocal enough.
My party's stance on this has been truly unacceptable, frankly disgusting. You know, I was part of those conversations expressing our grievances. I then gone on to publicly call for an immediate and permanent ceasefire. I got calls from two Jewish ladies screaming down the phone saying, what are you talking about foreign policy? But in some quarters there's been an underappreciation of just how difficult it is. Always use your democratic right. We don't really have a right to complain if we don't participate.
Salamun alaikum everybody, and welcome to the KHOJA Connections podcast by KONNECTION, where we continue to grow through conversation. And today we have a really special guest, Abbas Merali, and we're going to deep dive into his journey into politics and the learnings that he's seen, especially in these turbulent times. But before I give a proper introduction to Abbas Ali, I just wanted to note a couple of things. Firstly, I'm here instead of our usual host, Durain Hirji, so don't miss her too much. She will be back soon. And important message to provide is KHOJA as a charity does not support, endorse, or favor any political party. Of course, they do encourage everyone within the Jamaats to go out, do their research, learn about their local candidates, and use their voice through the democratic process of voting. It's really important to get in touch with the issues that are out there right now and use your vote to put your belief system forward and get the leadership you want. So that's really, really important. I also wanted to note that we had extended an invitation to Sister Sabira Laka, who's an independent candidate for MP in Harrow East. But unfortunately, due to scheduling, she wasn't able to join us. So without further ado, I'd love to now introduce us to our guest, Abbas Merali. So Abbas, welcome to the KHOJA Connection podcast. Lovely to have you here.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Wa alaikum salam. So Abbas, look, you've had a fascinating journey, you know, from the corporate world into the business world and social care. You've been a leader at various parts of the community as well. And now you've entered the arena of politics. So lots to talk about. I think my first question is one that's been really gnawing at me for quite a while. Why are you a Spurs fan?
Good question. Actually, there's a story about it. I've been supporting Tottenham since I was 4. And some of you listeners may know my brother Riaz, who's been a fanatic Liverpool supporter. And he's 10 years older than me. So he was already in the UK when I was in Mombasa. And as they do, brothers bring gifts for their younger brothers. So he must have picked up a Tottenham shirt for the cheapest shirt he could get. You know, being a student, probably for 50p was a Tottenham shirt. So he brought me a Tottenham shirt for some reason. I've supported Tottenham ever since.
Fantastic.
But then what I say, the smart reason what I reply to people is I knew one day if I ever moved to the UK, it would be in London and I had to support a London club.
Oh, fantastic.
So yeah, and then I'm a loyal person. So I've stuck with them all these years despite the lack of success, but at least they've entertained me with good football.
Absolutely. So I like that. Strategic loyalty and thinking ahead. Fantastic. But I jest. Obviously, there's lots of questions that I'd love to deep dive in with you. And I want to start with your journey.
Yeah.
So like I mentioned at the outset, you come in from the business world. So obviously running the family care home business with your brother.
Sure.
And lots of challenges in the social care arena, of course.
Right.
So I'm sure you've faced a lot of different obstacles and adversity, especially during the pandemic period. What took you from there and going through all of that into first went down the route of councillor,
Right.
and now standing as a candidate for MP.
Yeah.
So how did that transition happen? It's fascinating.
Yeah, good question. I mean, if you don't mind, let me even step further back because my interest in politics really started very early on. I arrived into UK from Kenya, Mombasa, at the age of 14. And during my A-levels, this was at the end of the Margaret Thatcher era. I did history and economics and A-levels. I had a fascinating economics teacher, Mr. Thomas, who inspired me on the works of Thatcherism. In history, I did my dissertation or whatever, the history project for A-levels on Disraeli's One Nation conservatism. And those were my early inspirations. And then I went to LSE and I did economics there. And those of you who've been to LSE will probably know that it's got the worst of hard left politics in there. So from my discourse, and I wasn't that politically active, but from my discussions and debates, I came out of LSE thinking, that's not my kind of politics. So there was that interest. And then I went to Ernst & Young. That was my first job where I qualified as a chartered accountant. And I remember clearly on the first day we had an induction and the facilitator was going around the table and he picked on me first and he asked the question, if you weren't here today, what would your dream career be? And until today, I don't know why I said the answer, because the instinctive answer should have been, tennis professional, because I'm really into tennis or something like that. But for some reason, I ended up saying Prime Minister. And everyone laughed like he did. And until today, I don't know why. And I've got no ambition to be a Prime Minister, just to be clear. But obviously, somewhere in there was always that interest. So I think that is important to understand. And then through all my community work, you made reference to some community work. And throughout I was an office bearer for WF in my early 20s, and I've been a co-ed counsellor. And we sit here in Harefield, so proud to be at Future today. What a place to host it. But 2 years ago, I was, in the middle of the courtyard. When we were thinking of buying it, we were involved with that. So through all those community work, there's always those conversations. I'm sure you've been part of those conversations that more of us should go into it. But it's always someone else's issue, not yours. Yeah. So I never thought I would do it myself. I always, busy with work, profession, kids, family. But then again, to answer your question, so I went from 13 years in the city. I've been running a social care business for 10 years. The local Conservative Party had been working on me to get involved since 2015, but I kept avoiding it. But when it finally happened, it was very impulsive, because it was at the end of the second lockdown in 2021. And as you say, I'd been through a tough journey in my social care business, navigating it through the pandemic, watching some of the 5 p.m. announcements every day and thinking, surely I can do better than that. And it was really impulsive. It was March 21 when I was introduced to the Watford Conservatives. And the guy called me, there's a Zoom call tonight, because at that time we were still in lockdown, so everything was in Zoom. Are you going to join or not? And then I just dialed in out of curiosity, and the rest is history. I agreed to stand in that election. In 6 weeks' time, I was on the ballot paper. So that's how I transitioned. It was very impulsive, but we'll come on to it, how one thing then led to another and another, and I find myself, fighting for a general election seat today.
No, absolutely. That's really interesting. So I guess there was a spark in you that thought, you know what, rather than speak on this side of the fence, let me try and get into the fray and see what I can influence. And immediately, what was that influence that you could see as you went into that councillor role and the build up to it?
Yeah.
Was there areas you could really impact? Was there areas you could really sort of drive your agenda and change?
Oh, absolutely. So look, I've always been of the mindset, because we got to be on the table, because otherwise you're on the menu, and I know it's a cliche, but it really is true that you can always only influence meaningful change by being inside. And even if that's incremental change, it's all marginal. It's all better than nothing. So especially as a councillor, to be honest, you can be very impactful. So I sit on a planning committee, which obviously makes some major decisions. I can speak up on various things. I have ability to influence budgets, where the local investment is, where the local plan is. The local plan is where the developments go in the local plan. So you actually, as a councillor, you actually have more of an impact on your local communities than you do even as a member of parliament. So you can definitely, but it's not just the policies you can change, but it's the mindsets you can change. Because a lot of what happens when you're in a group of a party with your colleagues, with your fellow councillors, with MPs, you're constantly having discussions and debates. And it's through those discussions, especially if you're a colleague that is respected and can talk credibly on a range of topics, when you do open your mouth on certain topics that are very close to us, you tend to get a more receptive audience from inside than you do from outside. So Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not a career politician, and I'm very proud of that fact. I think there's a dearth of people like me in Parliament. A lot of people in Parliament have just come from university and worked for MPs and worked for ministers and just climbed that Westminster bubble ladder. Whereas I bring real life, corporate, community life experience. And I think people like, and there are a few of them who can make a real difference to the future of politics in this country, which clearly needs a significant change.
Fantastic. And look, I want to deep dive a bit more into your journey comparatively in the corporate versus the business versus the politics and community.
Yeah.
We'll get to that. But
Yeah.
I think a really important question before we go any further is why the Conservative Party?
Sure.
And when I say that, was it always the Conservatives? Was there a choice? Was there any thought given to maybe being an independent? Talk us through that.
Yeah, no, a brilliant question. Obviously a very topical question as well. So look, I've always been a conservative. And for me, the values and the philosophy of conservatism are very aligned to my faith, our faith, and my culture. As KHOJAs particularly, or even Muslims, KHOJAs particularly, we're inherently conservative people. In terms of when I say values, I mean strong family values, traditional values, compassion, strong public law and order, personal responsibility, hard work, meritocracy, small government, low taxation. These are all conservative values. And I was attracted to them very early on, as I said, even before I went to university. My parents have always, and again, I grew up in like most of us, in a very sort of, with community, hard work, education, family. These were the core values that were instilled in me from a very early age. Also, my parents have always instilled in me that, like you said in your introduction, always use your democratic right. And I always say that to people. We've got a right to vote. We don't really have a right to complain if we don't participate. So alhamdulillah, I don't remember, maybe I missed one or two due to travels, but I don't think I've ever not voted at any elections, either general or local. And I've always voted Conservative. So then for me, it was a very natural choice when I decided to get into politics. As I said, impulsively, it was never really a debate, or I didn't sit down and think, okay, now I want to go now, which party should I join? It was just natural. It would have been very hypocritical of me to turn up in any other color, right? So the values of conservatism are very aligned. Now, obviously, we probably will come on to the fact that the current Conservative Party and some of the challenges within that and how that makes life challenging for me. I'm sure we'll cover that. But for me, it's not an issue. Now, since I've joined this journey, obviously, as you expect, a lot of people have come to me, both young, but also similar age and even older, to say, look, Abbas, how do I get involved in politics? This is really interesting. And the first thing I say to them is, you've got to choose a party. And I say to them, it will either come very naturally to you, as it did to me, or you'll have to do a bit of soul searching. But you need to find a party. I'd never say to anyone you should join the Conservative Party. I always say join a party that you broadly align your values with. There will never be a party that you will fully align yourselves to. It's not possible. I said it all my interviews when I was going through the selection process in the party. The typical question is, are there any conservative policies that you're not aligned to? And I was very open about that. There were a few. Obviously, if there's too many, then you should question why you're conservative. But there's always going to be a few. You asked me about independent. Now, I feel very strongly about that. So if you want to make a meaningful change, if you really want to participate, and for me, if I do get into politics and parliament, inshallah, I do have aspirations to, become part of government, change policy, make a meaningful impact. To be able to do that in this country, at least, and the way the system works, and it's not going to change anytime soon, if ever, we are largely at the national level, it's a two-party system. It's either Conservatives or Labour. At the local level, you can be influential in Lib Dems and maybe one or two other parties, and possibly as an independent, but still very difficult. But so for me, the whole, now I can see why as a community, a lot of people are emotionally heading towards supporting independence. I can see why people are doing that, especially post what's happened, the horrible events in Gaza. But it's really a waste of time, resource, community, funding, and human resources, because it's not going to. Firstly, hardly anyone is going to get elected as independent. And if there is one or two, and we've seen George Galloway famously being an independent or workers' party, but effectively independent, they don't exercise any influence. If there's 2 or 3 people in parliament who sit on the side, neither of the big parties are going to give them any time of the day. So actually, what have you achieved? And he's been an MP 5 times in 5 different constituencies. And apart from the rhetoric and all that, theatrical language he uses, beyond that, If you ask the question, what has he achieved? It's absolutely nothing. So you can only effect change from one of the main parties. And we also got to be practical and pragmatic. There's a lot of idealistic thought processes going on, but we live in a secular society. We're a fairly small proportion, a meaningful minority, but still a small minority as a proportion. What we can't do is try and polarize politics to say that, we need an Islamic party or a workers' party, which is basically a Muslim party. That's not how we're going to have any real impact in this society. We've got to be part of the system and accept that, look, we are in a British society. We're all chosen to be here. We all have taken a British passport. We had liberty. No one's compelled us to be here. We had liberty to pick up our bags and go wherever we want, pick up the passport and put it in the bin. But if we choose to live here, we've got to choose to live here whilst keeping our faith, whilst keeping our values. I'm not suggesting we ever compromise on that, but it's important that we integrate into the British values as well and be civil British citizens and be part of the community that gives back. And one of my inspirations is giving back. This country has done so much for me when I came from a 14-year-old. The opportunity, and this is partly why I'm a conservative as well, is that opportunity is a good example of conservatism. When someone comes in, looks at the opportunity, grasps them, works hard, grabs those opportunities and makes a success of it, that's conservatism.
I think, you've picked up on a couple of really paramount points there, and I really resonate with what you're saying. So I've always been politically towards the left.
Sure.
So that really speaks to me.
Yeah.
But even in this election, I'm at odds with some of. Let's leave aside the Palestine issue for a moment.
Sure.
But just on the normal politics,
right?
I'm at odds with certain policies, and I'm from an employment law background. Looking at the types of policies they're trying to bring in, you have real question marks. So it's a very confusing time. And I think it's great that we can own who we are and know where we are on the spectrum. I think that's a great starting point. And like you said, it doesn't mean we align with every single thing. But the second point, which I think is even more fundamental, and especially in this world of today, we need to not isolate ourselves, and we need to work within the apparatus that we have. Right?
Absolutely.
And I think it's fair to say that this was a key marker of the Ahlul Bayt.
Yes.
Who we'll not go into the politics that they faced, but for whatever reasons they weren't allowed leadership. They didn't just sit at home and pray for the best.
Sure.
They integrated, they influenced, and they made sure that they had an impact and their mission continued. What is your mission and what is your why in all of this? And I know that's a massive question, but if you could summarize it in a couple of sentences, what's your why here?
Yeah, there's 3 or 4 things. So first, I genuinely believe strongly that representation is key. We need a proportional representation of our faith, our ethnicity. We should be represented. We shouldn't shy away from the process. And it's taken a long time, because when my parents came here and your parents came here, the priorities were just, educating us and getting a job and putting food on the table. As we've now become more established in this country, we can now aspire to greater goals of actually participating in contributing to the future of this country and internationally. So 1 is representation. 2 is giving back, genuinely. I'm lucky. God has been kind to me, alhamdulillah. I've had a good career so far, but I'm even, still young enough to have an impact and, almost another career possibly. So I do want to really give back and leave a mark on society. Now, the third thing is, I want to, get involved in policy making. So when I was asked, if you ever made a, cabinet minister, which ones would you be interested in? Naturally, the ones that came up to me were sort of Chancellor or Minister of Business and International Trade or Health and Social Care, because that's what I've been doing for 10 years. And I really want to reform social care. No one's really done that. That's one of my passions. Work and pensions, because like you, I've done a lot on employment and workforce, or sports and culture, because I've always been SGRS, sports, etc. I never said I want to be a foreign minister, because that's something I don't have a national experience in, and I've had to learn a lot in the last 6-7 months, but it's not something that came naturally to me. But I do want to make a meaningful change to the country's future, and we're going through a really interesting time with innovation, artificial intelligence. Things are changing at such a pace, and to be involved in that would be really exciting. And then 4th is I've always enjoyed, I'm passionate about, doing new things and self-growth and self-development. Whatever I've done in my life, all the community work, corporate work, you and I have known each other for a while. I like that drive of doing things. And this is giving me that excitement, that challenge, that personal growth. And that's, so there's probably four reasons why I'm inspired to do this.
Fantastic.
And obviously, I will add
Sorry.
the fifth one is really be able to, if I can achieve at the end of this a society that is less Islamophobic than it is today, is respectful to our religion and faith, and if I can make within the Conservative Party, if I can change the perception and some of the reality into being a more friendly party towards us, and some of it is perception, some of it is reality, that would be a great success. Because with the party itself, there's nothing in the Conservative Constitution that we should support certain countries and not other countries. We should support certain races and not other races. We should support certain religions and not other. It's just a function of its members. It evolves. The party is what the people are, right? We have a real ability to change, politics and parties from within.
Yeah, and we'll touch on that in a bit more detail
sure.
shortly, because I think that almost misalignment of values versus what's there is something we should really discuss.
Sure.
But just before that, you talked about self-development, and
Right.
you've never been shy of leading the way,
Sure.
whether it's leading people or leading an agenda. I remember being part of your journey in SJ,
Yes,
when you were taking the SJRS forward, and I was part of the office bearers at SJ.
Yes.
And the sheer amount of work that yourself, Sibtan Ali Bhai, and others put in was incredible. And you really did make a change, and you really made an impact. How have you found the difference in leading in different environments? So you've obviously been in the corporate world, but more so the business world, and then within the community, and now politics. How do you navigate those leadership challenges, and how has it helped you grow as a person?
No, that's a really good question, Zamir. It's a very different challenge, I would say, and I'm still not in reflection mode because I'm in the thick of an election campaign. But it is a difficult challenge. It's brought about different skills that I didn't think I had, and I've learned a lot, because unlike everything else, you mentioned SHRS, most of the community work, corporate work, you lay down a vision, you communicate that and take your team with that on a journey. You do that very well in your business, and it's empowering people. And it's having a sort of a common purpose that everyone rallies behind. You mentioned me and Sibtain. We had a brilliant team, that dream team we used to call it. Politics, it took me a while to realize. It sounds obvious in hindsight, but it took me a while to realize politics in itself is very divisive. Yeah. So whilst a lot of people want to back you, and I've got a brilliant team, my party is fantastic. I've got a lot of respect within my party. But generally amongst the wider community, it's not that people don't want to. I'm not talking about the recent issues, because obviously that's made it even more difficult, but it's just at a general level. It took me a while to realize that if people ideologically are very much on the left, doesn't matter if they're your best mates or they really like you as a person, it is very difficult for them to openly get behind in your journey, which they would otherwise have done had I been in Jamaat or WF or anything else. But ideologically, politics is divisive, because I'm obviously not right wing. I'm very much a centre, and these days, there's hardly any difference between the two centre parties, Labour and but generally speaking, it took me a while to realize that it is generally a divisive. Without the additional Islamophobia in Palestine, it in its very essence is divisive. So you're not going to get that whole bandwagon behind you that you do in everything else you do.
Would you say it's almost tribal? Like, for example, the analogy I can think of is football teams. You kind of live and die by it. Do you think it's that sort of entrenched within someone?
It's difficult, because yes, it's tribal. But I think politics has changed as well, because certainly from all the conversations I have on the doorsteps and talking to thousands of people, which I do, which is a great part of the job, by the way. It really is. I think there's a lot of people who are apathetic as well, who are in the centre, who are not that tribal. So there is a tribal element. There is a generally apathetic, I don't care element. There's the young people who actually feel like they've been failed by the system. So they're either very apathetic or they're very idealistic, because young people tend to be. I mean, there's this whole notion that it takes a while. I was very odd as an 18-year-old or even 16-year-old to be a conservative. That's weird. That's unique.
So
usually people, is a journey when they buy their first house or get their first sort of proper job or start their business. It's in the 30s that people become conservative. And as Thatcher used to say, the facts of matter of life are always conservative. It's just a matter of fact at what stage of your life you discover it. The end is always conservative, she used to say. So there is always that journey, but I find that the young people are taking much longer to go through that journey, from idealistic behaviors to sort of pragmatic, practical life issues. when they became parents, and
Yeah.
they realize that actually there is you cannot just be idealistic.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. And what do you think are the obstacles then? So I guess what you're saying is the mindset might not be attuned
Yeah.
to getting involved because there's almost a back foot mentality that we've been defeated already, we've
Yeah.
been failed.
Yeah.
There's nothing we can do here. Let's just move on with our
Yeah.
lives. Do you think that's the crux of the issue of young people and that influx? And,
Yeah.
and let's talk about our community specifically.
Yeah.
What do you think is the barrier to entry?
Look, I think there's. I mean, just judging by the conversations I've had since I've embarked on this journey, there are a lot of people who are interested, who come up to me. So far, not really. I mean, look, alhamdulillah, there's 3 KHOJAs this time, and that's brilliant. We've got 2 conservatives and 1 independent, and that's, to me, that's as much a success as anything else, because it's inspiring to see. But I think there is a feeling that, look, everyone's busy with their own things, so they want to prioritize their families or work, but also because politics is very different to a lot of other work, is because you're in the public domain so much, the family has to sacrifice. I'm very lucky that my family has been very kind to me, and but it's hard. You're out there. I'm kind of the guinea pig, right? It's quite new in the KHOJA culture, and that's why people haven't quite understood, fully digested what's going on. So I think that's what's probably putting people off, is you are in the public domain, you continuously under scrutiny, and it's right that people should hold to account, because if I can't take scrutiny or be held to account, I shouldn't be doing this. That's part of the job, and being thick-skinned is part of the job as well. But I think that's probably what puts most people off, is that they don't feel that the amount of challenges they may have to embark on, is it really worth it? And I think that's why people in the end shy away from it. But I think you will see there'll be a lot of good youngsters. There's some very bright youngsters that I've come across, both conservative supporters and Labour members. I think you'll see some real bright talent. And if anything, if all I've done is just being a guinea pig, a trailblazer, for me, alhamdulillah, that's a great success. I'm happy for others to sort of finish off the journey, so to speak.
Yeah, and we've got to start somewhere,
Yeah.
right? And I think it's super positive to see that we've got 3 candidates going for it, trying their best, getting their hands dirty and getting involved.
Yeah.
Do you think as well, so look, getting to the more finer details of alignment with parties.
Sure.
And I'm sure you've been asked this question a million times, but where you've got a Conservative Party that's riddled with all sorts of allegations and sort of difficulties with Islamophobia.
Yeah.
And obviously that completely clashes with the value system you're bringing in.
Sure.
How do you operate within that zone? So firstly, have you seen that directly? Have you experienced it? I think that's really important to get out there. But also, how do you start the process of changing that tone and that mindset?
Yeah.
Because I feel maybe that's another reason people shy away from voting and shy away from getting involved, because they feel this is a entry point clash. So what's your experience been on that front?
Yeah. No, it's a very relevant question. So I think the first thing to say is Islamophobia is not a party political issue. It's a society issue. It exists in our society. It's very much there, and it's something we need to work strongly in a united fashion to tackle it. Our Jewish cousins do it really well in their fight against anti-Semitism, and we need to be far more united in our fight to Islamophobia. So it's definitely there. It's very much there in the Conservative Party, I think, although to answer your question, I've personally never faced it, and I'm a very open Muslim within my party. It's not like I'm a shy Muslim. Everyone knows I'm a practicing Muslim, and even my social media posts make it very obvious in the public that where my values are and what I fight for. And I publicly condemned Islamophobia in my party, such as Suella Braverman comments and Lee Anderson. I haven't been scared of. You'll see it on my Instagram. I publicly condemned her rhetoric on hate marches, etc. So it obviously exists in my party. It also exists in the Labour Party. You only have to read the Ford report to see how rife it is in the Labour Party. In some ways, the Tory Party is far more diverse than the Labour Party. So it exists. I personally haven't encountered it, but I have spoken up against Islamophobia in my party. Also, in my council, I've done a couple of speeches now on Islamophobia, particularly in the wake of the 7th of October. I constantly work with the local community police faith teams to work on Islamophobia, and the local mosque in Harrow. I've been working with all of them to ensure that their community safety is there, that Islamophobia is not an issue to their members. So we have to work on it. It is a problem. We have to work on it. But at the end of the day, it can only be confronted from within. And I have pledged, as part of this election, I pledged that if I get elected, I will do my utmost best to ensure that the Islamophobia definition, the APPG definition of Islamophobia, is adopted by the Conservative Party. That's my pledge.
Fantastic. No, that's great to hear. And it's interesting. You said earlier as well, and I think this is quite relevant because obviously you've had a lot of pushback, not just on this issue, in terms of a question as to why you're even in the Conservative Party.
Right.
So I think it's great you've addressed that. Obviously, there's since the 7th of October as well. But before we talk in more detail there, how has that fallout impacted you? So on several levels, have you found resistance within the party when you've spoken out? Have you seen any sort of pushback within? I know you've certainly had pushback outside.
Yeah.
How has that impacted you as a person, but also your family? Because you mentioned that earlier on, that the family are part of this process, going through the journey too.
Yeah.
Now, how have they found that sort of experience? And, has it been difficult, and how have you navigated?
Yeah. So two different questions there.
Yeah.
So within the party, I have to say I'm surprised that I had very little pushback. And I think partly it's because I've got a very honest and transparent approach. I'm not doing it in a sort of a hidden way. I've always been upfront. I've had conversations with the party chairman, Richard Holden, and prior to that, Oliver Dowden a couple of years ago as well. And I've been very open to them. We got a member of parliament in my neighbouring seat, the obvious name, in Harrow East. And I've had very transparent conversations with him. In fact, he was the one who actually applauded me when I called for a ceasefire. And I said, well, that's rich coming from you, given the kind of comments that, you have come out with. And his response was that, look, that's the beauty of our party, that on certain specific issues we can have completely polarized views, but generally we can still be conservative. So from my party, I haven't had pushback. There's been a lot of understanding. I work a lot with the Conservative Muslim Forum as well. Brother Hashim Bhatti, who's a chairman of Conservative Muslim Forum, he's a councillor in Windsor. He does a great job with his team. And he has regular meetings with Number 10 and CCHQ to push back on all the Islamic issues. So that's equivalent of the Conservative Friends of Israel, for example, which, to be clear, I'm not a member of.
Sure.
And I've never been to any of the events, in case any of your listeners are interested in that. But the Conservative Muslim Forum, whilst it's not as influential, it's still very potent in terms of the conversations it has. And, we just have to develop that, because when there was so much anti-Semitism going on in the Labour Party, my equivalents in the Labour Party were not told by their Jewish friends or colleagues or communities that you should come out of the Labour Party because it's anti-Semitic. They stuck around, they built a career within the Labour Party. Today, the Labour Friends of Israel is as strong, if not stronger, than the Conservative Friends of Israel. So this is what we need to understand. There is a Conservative Muslim movement, and they do some really good jobs. They found it difficult in the current environment, but they still stand up. So the party-wise, it's been fine. The community-wise, alhamdulillah, look, people focus on some of the, I would say, the stick or flack I've received, but, alhamdulillah, by and large, the majority of the people, should I say, probably the silent people, have been very supportive. I've really had a lot of support. I keep saying, when I got elected as a councillor in Moore Park, Eastbury, I won it quite easily. I got 1180 votes. Lib Dems were second with 280. And I kid you not, if you just count the Muslim votes alone, forget all the other votes, I would have won that election with just the Muslim vote. Wow. The entire KHOJA community and the wider Muslim Pakistani community, they all supported me wholeheartely in 2022. Here, this time round, you've been to some of my business club events. You've seen some of the people who've been knocking doors with me. I've got good support, not just KHOJA's, but Muslim support. The Pakistan community have been very good. Harrow Mosque and Sri Lankan Mosque, have been rolling out the red carpet for me. So I've had a lot of support. What I think overrides that is that minority strong voice. I don't blame them, because they're genuinely passionate. They genuinely are angry, as am I, about some of the things that have happened and some of the things my party has been guilty of. So there is that anger, but I think one shouldn't read that anger as in a wholehearted, a wholesale kind of, opposition. It's there, it's brewing, but above that, there are significantly more supporters and giving me all the encouragement. And I almost quit, I should say, because in the transparent of having an honest chat, this is a fireside chat.
Absolutely.
I did go through a period of self-questioning when me and my family sat down. Is it really worth persevering? Is it worth the reputational risk that it may carry? Because we are I'm very much a community man. I'm not a sellout Tory or anything like that, to state the obvious. And my personal integrity and family reputation is more important than anything else. And I want to continue being a strong member of the community. And then I went on a journey of speaking to about 6 or 7 different scholars. I'm not going to name them, but they're all household names that come into our members very frequently. And each and every one of them endorsed what I was doing, similar to what you were saying, but they went into a lot of details about examples from the 8th Imam and the Prophet, etc. But also they said that, stick to it, do not, because I was on the verge of giving up. And they said stick to it. But more importantly, my family and friends, particularly during Ramzan, when I was having a bit of a wobble, during the iftars that I went to or the sehri parties I went to, everyone said, look, just stick with it. Ignore that small people who are making noises, because people will catch up with the journey at some point.
No, absolutely.
So I've stuck with it, and I'm not a quitter. I could have easily given the option, because it's not my decision. It's not my choice that my first time of standing for Parliament has coincided with my party being at the lowest ebb in the polls, right? So it's not just the Islamic issues, just generally the party is at its bottom. So it would have been easy for me to just walk away. But coming back to why I'm still a Tottenham supporter, the same analogy, I'm not a quitter, right? I want experience. It's a life experience to go through what I'm going through. It's beautiful. It's really enjoyable. It's really interesting. I'm getting a lot out of it. So I took the journey. Why should I let Suella Braverman squeeze me out of my party? It's as much my party as it is hers. Why should I let some of their behaviors make me quit from the party? And Baroness Vasi has been superb. She's been helping me throughout this process and really advising me, and she's been on point, and I've taken her guidance throughout this process.
Brilliant. So look, it's really positive to hear that you've had that support, and actually diversity has been quite empowering in a sense. And you've been able to sort of bring various ways of thinking or different parts of the community together. And that's really, really powerful, really impactful. But obviously there is this tidal wave of an issue that I'm sure you never saw coming, and we'll go through. I know you've said to me, and we've had a few chats ourselves,
absolutely,
how the trajectory just totally changed overnight. And first and foremost, with regards to Palestine, with regards to Gaza, it's an absolutely heartbreaking situation. It's an atrocity that I think you mentioned it at the hustings, and certainly I can resonate with that. I've never seen anything so barbaric in our lifetime, and maybe even in our parents' lifetime. This is incredible. And I think to see such a genocide in process and progress, and I guess for us to be so far away. And we're doing what we can, but it's intangible almost. And I don't mean that in any way, sort of undermining the efforts that are being done, whether it's marches, calling out, being visible, being public about it. But it's morale shattering.
Absolutely.
That we just can't touch that issue in an impactful way from here. But yet, of course, we have a duty to keep trying and keep plugging away.
Absolutely.
That issue has not only diversity but divisiveness throughout all the parties, and I don't think there's a single party that has been untouched by the sort of cracks that it's created. And I know that's something that's constantly come up with you, and where I've had conversations and people have maybe not followed or misunderstood, or not everyone's going to have access to you. We know each other for a long time. We've had many conversations. I've asked you difficult questions. Not everyone gets that opportunity, because you can't talk to everyone. It's impossible. It's not practical. I guess the starting point is, it's been leveled at you that you've not been vocal enough, or in the right way, or with the right terminology. And again, I'm not at all having a pop at anyone. These are all very real feelings and emotions coming through. What is your starting position there? How do you respond to that? Because there has been a very real backlash there. Now, admittedly, it's great to hear that you've had overwhelming support, but I think on this issue it's been quite loud and sort of direct. What's your starting point there? What's your message there?
So look, the first thing to say is just echo what you say, is that what's happened is truly heartbreaking. 40,000+ innocent children, women, innocent civilians, and there's nothing like that in my lifetime, at least, that we witnessed. So what's happened is horrific and frankly unacceptable, totally unacceptable. So that, I think, that's the starting point. And And my party's stance on this has been truly unacceptable, frankly disgusting, and I made that quite clear. So I think that is, unequivocal. Inshallah, we all pray that there is not just sort of immediate stop in the fighting, but a real rebuilding exercise of aid and rebuilding Gaza, and given Palestine the justice and the ability to have their own state. That is really important. In terms of, it's been a unbelievable journey since October the 7th, because as I said before, whilst obviously we're all aware of the issues and the historical context, and I will be honest, it's not an area that I've studied in any greater detail. Middle East history or Middle East politics is not something. So I've had to quickly get up to speed myself in terms of, and because I'm now in the public domain, although I'm just a councillor, at that time I hadn't even been selected for Harrow West. So really, and I spoke to Baroness Vasi very early on and a few others, senior people, and all they said is, look, what can you do? You're in the position you are in. You don't have any agency or any voice. But there was something burning inside me saying, look, I can't just stay silent. I have to do something. So on the 27th of October, which is only 20 days after the events on the 7th of October, I organised my first roundtable, parliamentary roundtable with an MP, where I took members of our community, members of my constituents in Moore Park and Eastbury, and Sheikh Anwar Jaffer came as well, along with some EC members at that time, the previous EC. So that was my first of the three. And then there were two others, one in with the MP of Watford, where a lot of our Watford community members, plus the Pakistani community. So very early on, I had organised this roundtable. So I thought, what can I do? So I thought this is a way where rather than just people writing template letters and going to marches, this is giving them intimate access to people who are a member of parliament for you to then question them as to, and we talked about the disproportionate response, we talked about the historical context, and this was no holds barred. I was part of those conversations expressing our grievances. We, at the time, Suella Braverman was still Home Secretary and she was going on about all these hate marches, so we called her out. So these were really frank conversations. I had three of them. On the 15th of November, I put my first statement out, which was very much Palestine friendly. Again, you've got to understand that I'm responsible to all my constituents, not just a selected number of my constituents. So within minutes of me putting that post out in my Instagram, it's still there, anyone can check it. I got calls from two Jewish ladies who are my constituents in Moore Park and Eastbury, literally screaming down the phone saying, you're just a local councillor, sort out my bins, sort out my potholes. What are you talking about foreign policy? And if you really must talking about foreign policy, your message doesn't talk about Israel. It doesn't mention hostages. It doesn't mention 7th of October. It doesn't mention any of that. It's a one side. I'm saying, look, this is humanitarian. It's nothing about being, it's not a religious point. It's purely about humanitarian, and so many lives are being lost. I'm just calling an immediate end to fighting. I then gone on to publicly call for an immediate and permanent ceasefire, which I'm the only person from within my party, at least one of the only candidate who's had the courage. So people need to appreciate that I have had the courage and the conviction, which is not easy always in a system like this. You constantly, but because it was so against my values, I have done that. I've spoken on, as I said before, I've spoken on Islamophobia and the after effects of October 7th. I spoke in my council meeting in early December. So, and as you say, it's very difficult to keep communicating these things because, you come across defensive and you come across, I'm doing this not to show you or other people. I'm doing it because I feel strongly about these things. And I've done this consistently. What else I've done? I mean, should we talk about other things that I've been doing, or we'll come on to that? We'll come on to that for the Muslim community.
Yeah,
I'll come on to that.
Absolutely.
But just specifically on Palestine, I have then recently, when the Rafah invasion came up, I put a statement out saying that this is beyond depravity. So it's morally disgusting. So I think there's been a underappreciation maybe on some quarters, not all quarters. Most people get it, but in some quarters there's been an underappreciation of just how difficult it is and how courageous I've been. And if it took a little bit long, I don't think it took too long because 27th October was my first roundtable. But if people have that perception that it might have taken longer than necessary, people also have to realize that I'm also very new in politics. I don't come from a political family, or I'm not a career politician. This has really tested me to the limit in terms of, I didn't know what to do when these things were happening, which is why I took counsel and consulted people like Baroness Vasi and several others as to what I should do. And these things take time to digest, to understand. But even then, I think I came out fairly early in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, no, I think that's really profound, actually, because you're sort of touching on a number of issues that maybe we don't see. That fine balance between, the words that we as a public member can use without any repercussions versus the language that could potentially bring up legal ramifications as well as other ramifications.
Absolutely.
And just talk us through. So I think at the hustings as well, and I think you were quite clear in your position. But obviously there is this sort of question of why can't you use certain terms? Genocide being one example. What are the difficulties? What are not specifically on this term, but just in general? What are the difficulties one can or could face in this position where you're having to hold that respect of public office or potential public office versus what you're feeling inside versus legal definitions?
Sure.
And look, just to make clear to our viewers, it's not that we're not saying it's a genocide. What we're trying to do is really get under the skin of how do you have to be, or what sort of responsibility do you have when approaching these type of terms? And is there an issue with saying a word like genocide where you're coming from?
So look, firstly, I think as you probably discovered, I've become increasingly confident with this, and that comes with experience. I've literally been in the deep end, in the very deep end. And whilst I've got great community experience, life experience, business experience, this is completely new. I'm still relatively new in politics. I've had a lot of learning to do. But as you've seen, the journey since October to now, the pace of which and the aggressiveness of my words and my ability is increasing by the week and by the month, alhamdulillah. Now, in terms of the genocide point, to your point, you make a very apt point. So on the face of it, I don't think anyone will debate what's happening is a genocide. But genocide is a legal international human. It's not a dictionary, Collins Dictionary or Oxford Dictionary definition of genocide. It's a legal term. And being a lawyer far more than I do, this is an international human rights law term. So whilst I have been fully endorsing the ICC and ICJ rulings, which my party hasn't been, just to be clear, because the ICC and ICJ haven't yet said it's a genocide, logically, I have to be responsible. I can't just go and say things because the audience wants to listen to it just to please them and get them off my back. That is irresponsible. So I think I took the view at the time that because ICC and ICJ haven't yet ruled, who am I to be the one to judge that it's a genocide? Although on the face of it, it's disgusting and it is a genocide in my view. But I'm not a human rights lawyer. And I have to be, again, to your point, if I'm going to build credibility within the system, because if I really am going to impact change, influence my colleagues, influence my opposition, I have to be credible. If I become just a one-trick pony and become just like one of the people, on the audience, then I will lose that, power to influence people, to persuade people. The reason people agreed to have those roundtables with me in October and November last year was because they'd seen me in action talking about lots of different topics, the economy, health and social care, crime, etc. And then when Abbas Merali came and suddenly talked about Palestine and Gaza, they were willing to listen because he hadn't just been harping on about the same topic day in, day out. They thought, look, this guy's a credible guy. If he's talking about it, then he must be really hurting inside about what's happening. Let's give him an audience. So that's what people need to understand, is that to influence change, you cannot just be harping on about the same thing all the time.
And it takes time, right?
But this is really unique because it's hurtful, right? And what's happened, I don't think, and to be honest, it's not just us. I mean, the entire British public
for sure
has become pro-Palestine through this. And,
no, absolutely. I think it's become very clear. It's not a Muslim
issue. It's not a Muslim issue at all. Issue. I mean, I had a Hindu lady on the doorsteps the other week, and she's saying, "What's your view on Gaza?" To be honest, I have to say one thing, which is surprising, but also brings reality back. I've been campaigning for this election for months now. I've knocked on, I can't even remember, but thousands of doors, literally 7,000 doors, including lots of Muslims, because there's a lot of Muslims in Harrow West. I can honestly say that Gaza has only come up in literally maybe a couple of dozen conversations. It really is not a thing on the doorstep. It's obviously a very big thing when you go to the community events or mosque or things like that. But on the doorstep, it's all about local issues, what people are facing, what the families, the challenges they're facing. Very few Muslims even bring it up on the doorstep, which is interesting. I mean, when you think about it, and if you look at this elections debate, if you look at all the party manifestos, if you look at all the debate, all the newspapers, the Gaza topic, we all thought this was going to be the Gaza election. It really isn't. It's hardly, and if you look at the polls that came out yesterday, it made it clear that not a single independent is going to get a seat. Gaza has not influenced any seat. So we just have to be pragmatic as well a little bit. Not that we shouldn't go on about this issue, because I really applaud the protests, the marches, and all the effort that has been going on to raise awareness, because only by raising awareness are we going to change international public opinion on this topic. And we have. This time, I think we really have changed international public opinion. But I think people need to realize that when it comes to sort of elections and voting, you're not going to be able to use your voting power to change the, we have to be a lot more, involved in the system rather than change from outside the system.
Yeah, because look, it's quite realistic to say that we're not voting for the direct perpetrator, but the supporter of the perpetrator, if you like.
Yeah.
So like you said, it's not a direct influence via the voting system.
Yeah.
And there are many difficult issues out there. And, that's not to detract or undermine or take away what's going on in Palestine at all.
No, I'm not detracting it. I'm just saying that it really is not coming up on the doorsteps at all.
No, I resonate with that. And I think, just steering into some of these issues that are coming up, there's some real concerns about the economy, about the level of living, the standard of living. What are we to face? Are we going to go further down? Or, I know statistics are showing us that maybe we're creeping around the corner to recovery. But at the grassroots, maybe not everyone's feeling that.
Yeah.
What has been the key issues that have come out when you've been campaigning? What are people concerned about? And where are you able to sort of take that and give it some direction and some life?
Yeah. So generally on the doorsteps, for me in Harrow West, my number one pledge is around fighting crime and antisocial behaviour. From all the surveys I've done, from all the conversations I've done, and we do a lot of surveys, crime, antisocial behaviour, fly tipping, even litter. You wouldn't believe it. I never thought as a politician I'd be dealing with pan spitting and it frequently comes up in South Harrow and Rennersley, which we laugh, but it is a serious problem. So these are the issues, and where I can really influence, honestly, at this level, if I do, inshallah, become an MP, the real difference, especially when you're a backbench MP, is at local level. And because the council and Harrow Council is also conservative, that gives me a really good ability. Harrow Council became conservative 2 years ago. And by all accounts, from all the feedback I've had, they're performing significantly better than the previous Labour administration. And because I sit down with the leader of the council every week and the deputy leader, I have significant influence. So whatever I pick up from the potholes comes up quite a lot. Crime comes up quite a lot. Antisocial behavior, drugs, loitering, drinking in the streets, fly tipping, litter, all that comes up quite a lot. ULIS has obviously been a very big issue, as we all know. I don't want to labor on that. But all these things, high-rise buildings in Harrow, the overdevelopment, lack of infrastructure, that keeps coming up all the time. My ability to create these changes, I've already made these changes. So if we bring back, given the audience will be mainly interested in issues facing the Muslim community, already in the 6 months I've been involved in Harrow, I launched a Muslim cemetery project where I formed a committee between Hujjat, Salam Center, Sri Lankan Mosque and Harrow Mosque. And we've now identified 3 sites, of which one is almost certain to happen. So inshallah, that has been delivered and a lot of progress has been made in the 6 months. I've spearheaded that project. Harrow Mosque, we're having problems because I don't know if you're familiar with Harrow Mosque, but opposite that, they used to park at the Civic Centre, which is now a building site.
Of course.
So they're having significant parking issues. And in Ramzan, in the peak period of Taraweeh Namaz, they were really struggling. So I brought the council leader together, the Harrow Mosque committee, put them together, and I resolved the parking issues for last Taraweeh. But even this last Eid, a few days ago, they were again having the problem. And I'm now in the middle of, this is confidential a little bit, but I'm in the middle of a negotiation of a permanent car park solution for them.
Fantastic.
The Sri Lankan Mosque, I've been helping them with parking issues and planning issues as well. So my ability to really, and on Islamophobia locally, safety of the mosque, safety of the community, I'm very much involved in that. So actually, logically, if you think about it, I may be able to make a lot of noise and speeches about Palestine, but I might not be able to immediately change that. What I can change significantly is local issues at a local level for our communities, and not just on Muslim matters, but housing issues, personal planning issues, all these things, parking permits, disabled park, all these things I can intervene and accelerate, which might not seem that big, but it really allows me to change. And other area where I've changed, which is not a local issue, it's a national issue, is gender identity and sex education to young people in school. I felt very passionately as my daughters were going through that in terms of the indoctrination that's been happening and the kind of inappropriate education at the wrong age. And I have lobbied through Conservative Friends of Education with the Secretary of State for Education, Gillian Keegan, who's a good friend of mine. I've constantly lobbied on these things. I'm not saying it's because of my lobbying that this happened, but Rishi only about 4-6 weeks ago announced the banning of the gender identity education.
Okay.
And he's also changed the curriculum of sex ed to the over 13. So there's a significant changes. And in that sense, conservative values are very consistent to our traditional family Islamic values as well in that respect. But yeah, locally, I think those are the issues that keep coming up.
So you're saying there's a multifaceted strategy. As someone in the midst of it, you're trying to have a voice for the bigger issues and trying to channel that up. But you're also being a local voice and getting the practical grassroots, day-to-day issues. You're getting them either addressed or into the spotlight.
Correct. Well, addressed, in many sense. And look, we sit here in Harefield, and I know this is not in my constituency, but again, when we were going through the early challenges in Harefield, when we just acquired and the battles we were having in the local community and councillors, and I played and I continued to play a key role in the external engagement with the local MP, with the local councillors, with the local stakeholders. And again, having people from within our community, and even in the planning process, being on the planning committee, I've seen it from the other end. You build up a good understanding of what works with, councillors. Because at the end of the day, us councillors, we make a decision. It's the Hillingdon councillors here which will ultimately make a decision on the change of community use in Harefield. Having people like me who have been councillors, who can see it from the other end. Hillingdon Council is also conservative. I've got a very good relationship with all of them here, including the local MP who's in charge of Harefield, if he comes in at this election. These are all, people need to understand that these are all assets for our community, right?
It's building bridges.
Yeah,
building
absolutely.
bridges that maybe we wouldn't have if we didn't have a representation.
Absolutely,
there on the doorstep, right?
And I think most people appreciate that. When you take the emotion out, when you take that emotional layer out and come into pragmatic things and practical things, I think everyone gets it. But I'm emotional, so why shouldn't everyone else be?
Of course, no.
We've had a tough few months,
absolutely, and it's very difficult, right? As well, when you're abstract to it all, right?
True.
But look, I think this is really interesting because many people, to the uneducated eye, it feels like this huge Titanic ship that's just not moving. But what you're saying is there's a lot of things going, like an ant colony. Or there's constant motion and movement.
Yeah.
So, how important is it for us as constituents to not just hold our MPs accountable, but communicate with them and engage with them? Do you think there is that platform? I'm sure MPs change from constituency to constituency, but as a general rule of thumb, what you've seen, do you think there is that open platform that the constituents can engage more? And do you think there's an apathy towards it?
Oh, absolutely. And I would recommend that everyone engages with their local member of parliament. The only thing I would say, because I speak to a lot of MPs, and I have to add, the vast majority of Conservative MPs, colleagues of mine who I've got good relations, are good, honourable public servants. Unfortunately, we're going to lose a lot of them in a couple of weeks, given where the polls are. But most of them are not Islamophobic, racist, nasty Tories or whatever. They're genuinely hardworking public servants. They don't make the headlines because they're boringly getting on with their duty to their constituents. Absolutely, everyone should engage with their MPs. All I would recommend and suggest and request that it is done on a constructive way. So a few MPs clearly tell me, the ones that actually come and engage with them, and these roundtables that I was referring to, whilst it was very no holds barred, we were making our points, but it was very constructive. It was very civil. What the MPs don't have any time for is the standard template letters that come. They just get a generic same response. It doesn't change the needle. Whether you send 700 letters or 7,000 letters, it's got no change in the barometer. But if you engage and go to a meeting and discuss, they're very receptive. They will listen to you. They may not agree with you, but they will listen. So I would suggest that we should all hold our MPs to account. We should hold them accountable, but do it in a constructive manner where you're actually engaging in a discussion leading to something rather than just a bashing exercise.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really important. Communication, I mean, that's the whole theme of this podcast.
Yeah.
Communication is critical in life. Yeah. And if we don't put our voice out there, then we'll never know what impact that will make. And I think, unfortunately, there is that stigma that, we're already defeated. We're already behind the curve. But actually, you're quite right. We need to push through and sort of be heard in the right way and in an intellectual and strategic manner as well. So I think that's really positive to hear. One thing that's always fascinated me, and I really want to understand this is when you're working within a political party.
Yeah.
So, look, correct me if I'm wrong. There's almost an employer-employee type of relationship, or not.
Yeah.
I'll leave you to elaborate on that. But to what extent does the party influence your personal brand, for want of a better word? Where are the boundaries? And has that surprised you? Is that something you saw coming, or were you a bit taken aback? Just going on something you said earlier, you've come into this not as a career politician, so you've not really had a build up. Is there any training they give you? Is there, I guess we're getting to the crux of the processing when you're going into this this career field. Tell me more about that, because I'm really fascinated. What's the control aspect?
And also we should, maybe for another podcast, but we should discuss the actual journey of becoming a councillor, being selected as a candidate, even my journey of how to be selected as a candidate. I mean, I don't know if we've got time now, but people, I think, have got no idea about the whole process. It's very elaborate. It's very difficult. Even getting a seat is very challenging. Very challenging. Even a seat like Harrow West is not easy to get. But to answer your question, what surprised me is Conservative Party is the largest party in the world, the most successful party in the world. It's been around for donkey's years, and it's actually the most successful political party in the world. I was shocked as to how embryonic some of the things are. And I remember 2 years ago, I was having iftar at CCHQ headquarters. They invited me. And at that time, Oliver Dowden was the chairman. And he was just saying about sort of, how Muslims are very generous and charity in Ramzan and all that. And, Muslims, 150 million is given to charity by Muslims in Ramzan. So he was doing his standard speech, which I'm sure someone would have written for him. And then afterwards, during iftar, we were just having a chat. And I was trying to understand, can you imagine the entire annual budget, not in the election year, but in general year, the Conservatives only raised 20 million in the whole year.
Wow.
So it's quite a small, for the size of the party it is. And I joked to Oliver, and that time we just finished raising 7 million for our Harefield project. If you remember, March 22 was when we exchanged. So I said to Oliver, really? Because my community, which is a very tiny Muslim community, we've raised 7 million in 5 weeks. And you guys raised 20 million. And he looked up and he said, oh, which community is this? Maybe I should come and get some funds from you. But actually, it's a franchise. I'm sure you're used to a franchise model. It is really, even as a candidate, you get the branding, you get the template. So, it's like getting a Baskin and Robbins. So you get that branding, you get the ice cream. But actually, you do everything. It's a bit like that. I'm literally starting, having grown my business from a small business to a medium business. This is actually like a small business. I've recruited my own team. I've recruited everything. The party just provides the kind of, you do your own funding. So the business club that you came to, I raised a lot of funds, and a lot of them have come from KHOJA as well. So party just creates the facilitation. They don't actually. Now, if I was a very sort of marginal seat, they would invest a lot more resources. But for the vast majority is that. But even when you become an MP, and a few of my MPs, when I ask them, even when you become an MP, it's like being a small business owner within Parliament. So you have to build your own office, parliamentary office. You're almost sort of competing with your colleagues for resources and things like that. So it is actually quite weird, because outside in, you think this is a big organization, it's a machine. And yes, it is a machine, but it's a lot of it is just sort of devolved to the local level. And certainly as a councillor as well, as a councillor, we've got our own Conservative group locally, and we form our own policies, and we're not really dictated or directed by the headquarters or head office. Now, clearly, in terms of branding, the party has a manifesto, the party has policies. So we published a manifesto, it's in the public domain. And whatever our manifesto is, it's collective responsibility, right? We've all been in teams where when you're putting something together, you may have good, healthy debates. But in the end, when you come to an agreement, it's collective responsibility. You're betting for the team. Now, unless it goes against my conscience or things like Palestine and things like that, by and large, you get on with it and you back the party manifesto. And that's teamwork and that's team responsibility.
Like in any good
like in any corporate world
or
any
Jamaat,
you're not going to agree with everything.
For sure.
But it's collective responsibility. You just crack on with it. And that's where the branding comes. But you have to have a branding. Without that branding, you just cannot survive in politics. You have to have a party brand, because the vast majority of the people out there don't vote for me personally. So in local elections, yes, but at a national level, they're voting for the brand rather than you. I would say maybe 10% of my votes or 15% would be personal votes. The rest are party votes, right?
Okay. I love that franchise analogy. And actually, I never even,
Yeah. And not many
realize
people,
that's
even
how
I
it
didn't know
works,
that,
but
you know?
yeah, this is fascinating
Yeah.
actually. So I've learned something very profound today. So no, thanks for sharing that. If someone wants to get into a political career,
Yeah.
and obviously, I think you're right. This is a podcast for another day on a more elaborate level. But where do you start?
Yeah, I'm going to start by joining. So, firstly, you have to, as I said before in this podcast, you have to decide which party you want to be with. Become a member of the party. Now, membership, I digress a bit because this is a very important point that our community just doesn't understand. The listeners will find it interesting. The members have significant influence. So today, the Conservative Party, in 2019 elections, 15 million people voted for the Conservative Party. But we only have 150,000 members. That's only 1% of the entire membership are actually members. But it is these members that have the ability to choose who their leader is going to be. So when Rishi and Liz were going on, it's the 150,000 people that made the decision to choose Liz. Right. Even me, when I got selected in Harrow West, it's the Conservative members in Harrow West that selected in the hustings. There was hustings. So I think there was about 66 applications. They narrowed it down to 6. There was executive council interviews, of which then they selected 3 for the final hustings. And in the final hustings, it's the party members who live in Harrow West. We did a 5-minute speech. We were grilled for 25 minutes. And you're not grilling me. That was a real grilling. Yeah, it was done by an ex-MP. And we all sweated for half an hour each. And then there's a secret ballot at the end of it. And the members choose. Okay. So what people don't realize, I keep telling our community, that people who are Conservative leaning, or for that matter, Labour leaning, if you have one kind of leaning one way or the other, become a member of the party. It's only 25 quid or 30 quid a year or whatever. But that gives you an influence. Then you can't complain that, well, I don't like this MP. Well, you should have gone and selected someone else then, right? And actually, you can really change. It takes only 50, 60, 70 people. If 70, 60 of ours people, from Stanmore, wherever, became party members, and I'm not suggesting that people who are naturally Labour-minded should join the Conservative Party. I'm not suggesting that. But a lot of our community, and they're probably a bit shy at the moment because they don't want to get the same stick as I am, but there's a lot of our community which even this year will vote Conservative, I can assure you that. Not personally for me, but in whichever constituency they are. And they should be joining the party because they will be able to then influence who the next leader is, who the MP in there. And likewise, the people who are supporting Labour should do that as well. There's no concept that our community should only support one party. We need our members and supporters across the political spectrum, for sure, right? But to answer your question, at a practical level, you join a party. You have to be a member, and then you just start working with your local association. So wherever you live. So you're in Watford or Bushy or
I'm in Stanmore.
Oh, you're in Stanmore. So you join whichever your Harrow East
exactly.
party representative is, and then go out canvassing with them, go to their social events, whatever, get to know them. They're always looking for good councillors. Good people there's very few good people who want to be councillors. So if you're good and you got the skills, you will pick up a seat, and maybe you'll have to do a seat that is maybe not winnable to start off with, and then get. But I would suggest anyone who's got an interest. It's very easy. It's very possible. You just have to be dedicated. You have to be passionate, and you have to believe, and you have to have a conviction. You have to have a why. You can't just do it for the sake of ticking a box. Absolutely. No one's interested in the title. Honestly, I mean, there's no glory in being a councillor or an MP. Sure. Yeah, there is no popularity contest here. You have to have a passion for making change and giving back and creating a real difference to your local communities.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing that. I think the viewers will find that very interesting. I mean, I've certainly been educated a lot today. So thanks for sharing these inner workings, because I think that's the bit.
And there's a lot more which I'm happy to go into.
Absolutely.
And I always say, and there's a lot of people who come to me for help, I always say it's an open door.
Oh, fantastic.
You really don't have to be a Tory. I don't mind at all. Just join. Just get involved. I mean, I'm personally not in favour of independence. Sure. But generally, I'm in favour of representation across the political spectrum.
Absolutely.
And I will help. Regardless of the party, I'll help.
Well, that's good to know. And I'm sure hopefully there'll be a flood of people reaching out in the months to come as well.
I'm going to increase the
once you're a bit more
Green
available.
Party membership or something like that.
Absolutely. I'm going to ask you 3 short, sharp questions now.
Okay.
What's been your biggest challenge to date in your political journey?
I mean, I have to say that, balancing, I don't know how to put it because, but it's sort of understanding the community feelings and trying to address them and make people understand that actually we're on the same side. We're not on different sides. We're the same team. We're on the same side, trying to achieve the same things. Sure. I think that's been challenged because it's been so emotional, and it's very difficult to rationalize in a period of emotional frenzy, which we're still in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So
Absolutely.
I think that's been the biggest challenge. Obviously, the fact that my party is in its doldrums, and I laugh about it because it really is that bad. And I shouldn't be saying this 2 weeks before the election, but it's really bad. That hasn't bothered me at all, because that's just the luck of the draw, that my timing of my journey has coincided. It's a great learning curve. For me personally, it's a win-win.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying it. I'm learning. I'm having a great experience.
Yeah.
I've got no pressure. The people under pressure are those in very safe seats who might be, hopefully not, but some very safe seats might be going this time, which is, in the long term, that will be a tragedy, because I really don't think the Labour government will be a good thing for this country. But
okay, no, great. And let me put context when I say this. What's been your greatest mistake or failing? And when I say failing, I use the term my child taught me, which is first attempt in learning. So what's been your trip up that you've learned from most? And not from a perspective of judgment, more from a perspective of, if you look back, hindsight is always our friend, right? What's been your greatest learning
in the political endeavor?
from this journey or this part of your life?
Yeah. I mean, like you, I always go through a period of self-reflection constantly, and I honestly say I'm in such a campaign mode at the moment, and you have to be. What I've learned a lot is psychology. The psychology of keeping on believing that you're going to win, telling your troops you're going to win. And I genuinely am. Harrow West is going to be very different to most of the other constituencies. That psychology, you got to be in the zone. And I'm going to do a full debrief and self-reflection after there's always mistakes. We always make mistakes. I don't think anything comes out that strongly, to be honest. Obviously, I might have been able to handle the communication better, so people, understood me better. There were no misconceptions. I could have done that better. I'm not quite sure how, because when the currents are against you, it doesn't matter what you say. So sometimes it takes time for things to digest. But yeah, I will do a full reflection. I'm sure there's plenty of mistakes I'll learn from.
Oh, fantastic.
But nothing really comes to mind.
Yeah, no, fair enough. It's sometimes hard to see in the midst, but
I'm sure there'll be plenty. There'll be plenty. Yeah,
absolutely. And my final question of the night is, what does connection mean to you?
It's very important, because I think politics is all about connections. In every doorstep conversation I'm having, I'm actually connecting to the person, because it's not about me. When you go to a doorstep, it's nothing to do with me. Vote for me. No one cares about you. No one cares. People don't vote for their party or the person. People vote for themselves. Every person really, if you think about it, makes that decision based on them and their families. What's in our family's best interest, best values, best alignment. So connection is everything in politics to me. If you are someone who connects to your audience, who understands, who's got empathy, who relates to it. And alhamdulillah, throughout my life experience, because I've had such a varied experience of doing M&A deals with the CEOs of this world in some of the largest corporates, to employing 250 people in my care business, who perhaps at the other end of the social demographic spectrum, and everyone in between, and through my sports and my varied interests and my community work and the variety of different sectors I've done, I find what I really enjoy, and I think I briefly touched upon this before, one of the best parts of my job is my conversations with people, whether in community engagements, in mosques, in temples, on the doorsteps, in schools, wherever I go. I get invited everywhere. I go and speak everywhere, as you see from my social media. But it's not me speaking that's interesting. It's me listening to everyone, connecting. And what I really enjoy is I always find I got something that I connect with people on. So I ask them, how are you feeling? When I knock on the doorstep, I don't say, will you vote for me? Or I'm a Tory. No, nothing to do with that. How are things? How are you finding life? What are your challenges? What are your issues? And then I try and relate and connect.
Okay.
And that's connection to me. And in politics, connection is absolutely... If more politicians understood what I've just said, we'd have a far better country. Because politicians think about themselves. What they don't think about is the people they serve. Because you're there for those people, not for yourself.
No, fantastic. And as someone who really values engagement, I think it's music to my ears. So no, Abbas, it's been a fascinating journey. We've got so much more to talk about.
Inshallah.
And I'm sure we'll pick it up
We'll
another
do a
day.
reflection. At the
But
moment,
thank
I'm
you.
in the zone.
Yeah, no, but thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Thanks for being vulnerable. Thanks for being open and honest.
No.
And look, whichever path you end up going, we wish you all the best.
No, thanks very much. And all I would say to the listeners is please remember me in your du'as. This is a tough journey, but I'm overwhelmed with the support I'm receiving. And inshallah, we'll have a this will be a start of many other things to come from the wider community.
Inshallah.
Thanks for having me.
No worries. It's been fascinating.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening and watching the KHOJA Connection podcast. Please do visit the KONNECTION website to donate and subscribe to the channel so that you get notifications for future episodes to come.